A billionaire marries a homeless black woman for a bet, but on their wedding night he discovers her secret, a heart full of courage and a past filled with pain and resilience. What starts as a game becomes a love that shakes their world forever. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The night of the Met Gala was supposed to be perfect for Blake Thompson III. At 40 years old, he had everything a man could want: good looks, money, and a beautiful fiancée. But life had other plans. Blake stood at the top of the Metropolitan Museum steps pulling at his bow tie. The cameras flashed as reporters called his name. Everyone wanted a picture of New York's most eligible bachelor, well, soon-to-be-married bachelor. His fiancée Ashley Bennett was running late as usual. "Mr. Thompson, over here!" the paparazzi shouted. Blake gave them his practiced smile, the one that had landed him on the cover of Forbes. As CEO of Thompson Fashion Empire, he knew how to play the game. Sandra Wu, his assistant, appeared at his elbow. "Sir, there's something you need to know." Her face was pale. "It's about Miss Bennett." Before Sandra could finish, phones started buzzing throughout the crowd. Blake's heart dropped as he saw the breaking news alert. Fashion heir's fiancé caught in steamy affair with French model. The video was everywhere within minutes. Ashley, his Ashley, wrapped in the arms of Jean-Luc something or other in the coat check room of all places. The timestamp showed it was from just 30 minutes ago. "Get me out of here," Blake growled to Sandra, but it was too late. Ashley appeared at the bottom of the steps, her white dress perfect, her fake smile in place. The reporters went wild. "Ashley, is it true? Miss Bennett, how long has the affair been going on? Mr. Thompson, did you know?" Blake felt the rage building inside him. 3 years of his life wasted on a woman who couldn't even wait until after the wedding to cheat on him. He turned and stormed into the museum, leaving Ashley to face the media circus alone. Inside, the party was in full swing. Blake headed straight for the bar, ordering a double scotch. His mother, Katherine Thompson, materialized beside him in her designer gown. "Darling, we need to handle this carefully," she said, patting his arm. "Perhaps it's for the best. I never thought she was quite suitable." Blake laughed bitterly. "Suitable? Mother, she was exactly what you wanted. Rich, white, from the right family. And look how that turned out." As he drained his glass, he caught sight of something through the crowd. A young black woman was quietly arranging flowers in a corner, her movements graceful and focused. Despite the chaos around her, she worked, with perfect concentration, creating beauty from simple blooms. "You know what?" Blake said loudly, drawing the attention of nearby partygoers. "I bet I could take any woman at all, and turn her into a better society lady than Ashley ever was. In fact, the scotch was definitely talking now. I bet I could do it in 30 days. The crowd murmured. Katherine's face went pale. "Blake, darling, you're upset. Let's go home." But Blake was already moving through the crowd toward the flower arranger. She looked up as he approached, and he was struck by the quiet dignity in her eyes. "What's your name?" he demanded. "Destiny Williams," she answered calmly, continuing her work. "And what do you do besides arrange flowers?" "At the moment, I try to survive." She met his gaze steadily. "I'm homeless, Mr. Thompson. I do odd jobs where I can find them." The crowd gasped. Blake smiled, a dangerous glint in his eye. "Perfect. How would you like to make $100,000? Destiny carefully placed the last rose in her arrangement. "I'm listening. 30 days. I'll teach you everything you need to know about high society. You'll live in my mansion, wear the best clothes, learn from the best teachers. At the end of the month, you'll attend the Thompson Charity Ball as my date. If you can pull it off, the money is yours." The room had gone silent. Everyone waited for her answer. Destiny looked at him thoughtfully. "I have conditions," she said finally. Blake laughed. "Conditions? You're homeless, and you're giving me conditions?" "Yes." Her voice was firm. "Half the money goes to creating a foundation for homeless women, and I want it in writing, that I maintain full control over my own decisions during these 30 days. I won't be your puppet, Mr. Thompson." Blake stared at her, impressed despite himself. "Done. We start tomorrow." As the crowd erupted in excited chatter, Katherine grabbed Blake's arm. "Have you lost your mind? What will people say?" Blake watched as Destiny returned to her flowers, ignoring the whispers around her. "They'll say whatever they want, Mother, but I think we're about to give them something new to talk about." What no one knew, not even Blake himself, was that this drunken bet was about to change everything, not just for him and Destiny, but for the entire world of New York high society. The next 30 days would test them both in ways they never expected and teach them that true class has nothing to do with money or social status. Sandra was already on her phone preparing the contracts. Tomorrow the experiment would begin. But tonight, Blake Thompson III had thrown down a gauntlet that would shake the foundations of his privileged world and his own heart forever. The morning after the Met Gala, Blake had a hangover and second thoughts. He sat in his study, watching the news coverage of his humiliation play over and over on every channel. The headlines were getting worse. Fashion CEO's fiancé scandal and Thompson heir's drunken bet with homeless woman. What exactly did I agree to? Blake, asked Sandra, rubbing his temples. According to the contract I drew up last night, you're giving Miss Williams 30 days of training in exchange for $100,000, half of which goes to her foundation. Sandra checked her tablet. She should be here any minute. The doorbell rang, and Blake's butler, Edwards, appeared looking uncomfortable. Sir, Miss Williams is here. She's in the foyer. Blake walked out to find Destiny standing calmly in his marble entrance hall, carrying a small backpack. She wore clean but worn clothes, and her hair was neatly braided. The morning sunlight streaming through the windows showed the exhaustion on her face, but her posture was perfect. Did you sleep at all? He asked. The shelter was full last night, she answered simply. But I'm ready to begin. Something twisted in Blake's chest. Before he could respond, his mother burst into the foyer. Blake, darling, the country club is in an uproar. Everyone's talking about... Katherine stopped short when she saw Destiny. Oh, you're actually going through with this? Mother, this is Destiny Williams. Destiny, my mother. Katherine Thompson. Katherine's smile was cold. How interesting. Well, I suppose we should get started. Edwards, show her to the servants' quarters. No, Blake said firmly. She'll stay in the blue suite. And she's not a servant, Mother. She's our guest. A guest who's being paid to be here, Katherine muttered. Destiny spoke up. Mrs. Thompson, I understand your concerns, but I signed that contract for one reason. To help other women like me. If you have a problem with that, we should discuss it openly. Katherine's face flushed. Well, I can see you'll need extensive training in proper manners. Actually, Blake cut in, I think she just demonstrated perfect manners. Honest, direct, and dignified. Mother, don't you have a charity luncheon to attend? After Katherine left, Blake turned to Destiny. I'm sorry about that. Don't be, I knew what I was walking into. She looked around the massive foyer. Where do we start? First, you need rest. Sandra, show Miss Williams to her room. Then we'll begin with the basics. Wardrobe, etiquette, social protocols. As Sandra led Destiny upstairs, Blake's sister Olivia came running down. Is she here? I want to meet her. She caught sight of Destiny and grinned. Hi, I'm Olivia, the only normal one in this family. Destiny Williams. They shook hands. Don't let Mom scare you, Olivia said. She tried to send my college girlfriend to conversion therapy. Now we're married, and Mom pretends Jane is just my roommate. For the first time, Destiny smiled. It transformed her whole face, and Blake found himself staring. Thank you, she said to Olivia. It's good to know I have at least one ally here. Once Destiny was settled in her room, Blake called an emergency meeting with his staff. The servants gathered in the kitchen, looking uncertain. Miss Williams is our guest, he announced. She will be treated with the same respect you show any member of this family, is that clear? The staff nodded, but Blake saw the looks they exchanged. He knew what they were thinking. This was just another rich man's game, using a poor woman for entertainment. They were wrong, but it would take time to prove it. Later that afternoon, Blake knocked on Destiny's door. Ready to begin? She opened the door, and he was surprised to see she'd already showered and changed into simple clothes from her backpack. Her hair was now in a neat bun, and despite her obvious tiredness, her eyes were alert. Before we start, she said, I need you to understand something. I'm not ashamed of who I am or where I come from. If this is about erasing me to create some perfect society, lady, you've made a mistake. Blake considered her words. What if it's about showing everyone that true class isn't about where you come from, but who you are? Then maybe we both have something to learn. She stepped into the hallway. All right, Mr. Thompson, show me your world. As they walked downstairs, neither of them noticed Katherine watching from her sitting room, her phone pressed to her ear. Ashley? Yes, she's here. No, this won't do at all. We need to handle this situation carefully. Meet me at the club in an hour. The game was on, but it wasn't just about a bet anymore. In the Thompson mansion, the battle lines were being drawn. Between old money and new spirit, between prejudice and progress, between a man's wounded pride and a woman's quiet strength. And in the middle of it all, two people who thought they knew exactly what they wanted were about to discover how wrong they were. The first week at Thompson Mansion was unlike anything Destiny had ever experienced. Every morning started at 7 sharp with Edwards knocking on her door. Then came a whirlwind of lessons that left her head spinning. No, no, no! The etiquette coach, Mrs. Whitmore, tapped her ruler on the dining table. The fish fork goes on the outside. And your posture, shoulders back. Destiny adjusted the silverware again, fighting exhaustion. She hadn't slept well in days. The bed in the blue suite was too soft, too different from the hard shelter cots she was used to. That's enough for today, Blake interrupted, entering the dining room. He'd been watching Destiny's lessons from his study, and he couldn't help but notice the dark circles under her eyes. Mrs. Whitmore protested, "But Mr. Thompson, we haven't even covered the proper way to eat soup." I said that's enough. Blake's tone left no room for argument. After the coach left, Destiny slumped in her chair. "I didn't ask for your help. I know, but you need rest. This isn't a sprint, it's a marathon." She looked at him curiously. "Why are you being nice to me? This whole thing started because you wanted to prove a point." Before Blake could answer, Katherine burst into the room. "Blake, darling, we have a situation. The country club board is meeting today about, well," she glanced at Destiny. "They're concerned about certain new elements in our social circle." "You mean they don't want a homeless black woman at their precious club?" Destiny said calmly, standing up. "Don't worry, Mrs. Thompson, I'm used to people like that." "Now see here," Katherine bristled. "If you're going to be part of this experiment, you need to learn your place." "Mother," Blake's voice was sharp, "Destiny's right, and if the club has a problem with my guest, they can take it up with me directly." After Katherine stormed out, Destiny turned to Blake. "You don't have to fight my battles." "I know, but maybe I want to." Their eyes met, and something shifted in the air between them. The moment was broken by Sandra rushing in. "Sir, there's a problem. The press is outside. Someone leaked photos of Destiny's first etiquette lesson." Blake cursed. "How did they—" He stopped, remembering how his mother had been on her phone all morning. Destiny walked to the window. Sure enough, photographers were crowded at the gates. The headlines would be brutal tomorrow. "I can't do this," she said quietly. "I can't be what they want me to be." "No," Blake said, moving to stand beside her, "but you can be better. Show them who you really are." That afternoon, Blake cancelled all of Destiny's lessons. Instead, he took her to the mansion's music room. "Sandra told me you used to play piano at Juilliard," he said. "Show me." Destiny hesitated, then sat at the grand piano. Her fingers touched the keys, and suddenly, the room filled with Chopin. Blake watched in amazement as she played, her face transformed by the music. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "That's what real class looks like," he said finally. "Not their rules or their manners. That grace you have when you play, that's what we need to show them." "I haven't played in so long," Destiny admitted. "After my mother got sick, I had to sell my piano to pay the medical bills. Then when she died," she stopped, fighting tears. Without thinking, Blake reached out and took her hand. "The piano is yours. Practice whenever you want. I don't need your charity." "It's not charity, it's an investment in who you really are." That night, Katherine met Ashley at an exclusive restaurant downtown. "The plan isn't working," Ashley complained. "Instead of being humiliated, she's actually winning him over." "Patience, dear," Katherine smiled. "I've invited some special guests to tomorrow's dinner party. Let's see how our little Cinderella handles real pressure." Back at the mansion, Destiny couldn't sleep again. She made her way to the music room and began to play softly. On the floor above, Blake lay awake, listening to the gentle music floating up through the floors. Neither of them realized it yet, but the bet was becoming something else entirely. As the piano notes drifted through the dark house, old walls were starting to crumble. Walls of prejudice, of pride, of pretense, and somewhere in that music, two hearts were learning a new rhythm. The next evening, the Thompson mansion buzzed with activity. As staff prepared for Katherine's monthly dinner party, Destiny stood in her room, staring at the dress Blake had sent up. A simple black cocktail dress that probably cost more than a year's rent in her old life. Olivia burst in, already dressed for dinner. "Need help? Mum's invited half the country club board tonight. She's up to something." "I know," Destiny said, slipping into the dress. "She wants me to fail." "Well, we're not going to let that happen." Olivia grinned and pulled out a makeup bag. "Let's show them what you're made of." Downstairs, Blake greeted the first arrivals, Mr. and Mrs. Wellington from the club board. "Katherine tells us you have a special guest staying with you," Mrs. Wellington said with a thin smile. "Yes, Destiny Williams. I believe you will find her quite remarkable." Blake kept his tone pleasant, but his eyes were hard. The guests filed in, all designer dresses and fake smiles. Then Ashley arrived wearing a red dress that screamed for attention. "Blake, darling," she called out, "your mother insisted I come." Blake's jaw tightened. Before he could respond, a murmur went through the crowd. Destiny was descending the main staircase, and every head turned to watch. The simple black dress fit her perfectly. Her hair was elegantly styled, and she moved with natural grace, but it was her eyes that caught everyone's attention. Proud, confident, and completely unafraid. "She cleans up well," Ashley said loudly. "Almost like a real lady." Destiny reached the bottom of the stairs and smiled. "Thank you, Ashley. Coming from someone who cheats on their fiancé in coat check rooms, that's quite a compliment." The crowd gasped. Blake hid a smile behind his hand. Katherine quickly intervened. "Let's all move to the dining room, shall we?" The seating was clearly arranged to make Destiny uncomfortable, placed between the stuffiest board members. But as the first course arrived, she handled everything perfectly. The right forks, the right small talk, the right amount of charm. "Miss Williams," Mr. Wellington said, "Katherine mentioned you were homeless before this arrangement. How fascinating. Tell us, what was that like?" The table went quiet. Katherine smiled smugly, sure this would be Destiny's downfall. "Actually," Destiny said calmly, "I'd love to tell you about it. Did you know that 40% of homeless women in New York are former professionals? I was a concert pianist before medical bills destroyed my savings. Many others were teachers, nurses, accountants." She took a sip of water. "The shelter where I stayed was full of talented, educated women who just needed a second chance. That's why half of Mr. Thompson's generous bet is going to create a foundation to help them." Blake watched in amazement as Destiny turned the trap into a triumph. The women at the table were leaning in, interested despite themselves. Even some of the board members looked thoughtful. But Ashley wasn't finished. "Oh, how charitable of you. And tell us, what else do you plan to do with Blake's money?" "The money isn't important," Destiny replied. "What matters is changing the way people think. For example, did you know the country club that some of you are so worried about letting me into was built by black laborers in 1910? They just weren't allowed inside once it was finished." Dead silence fell over the table. Katherine's face was red with anger, but several guests looked ashamed. "More wine, anyone?" Blake offered, unable to hide his pride in Destiny's handling of the situation. The dinner continued, but the dynamics had shifted. Destiny fielded every subtle insult with grace, every trap with wisdom. By dessert, even Mrs. Wellington was asking about the foundation. Ashley stormed out early, followed by Katherine. Blake found them arguing in the hallway. "She's ruining everything," Ashley hissed. "You promised me this would work." "Patience," Katherine said. "I have another plan. The charity ball is still weeks away." Blake stepped back quietly, his heart pounding. What were they plotting? Later that night, he found Destiny in the music room again. "You were amazing tonight." She looked up from the piano. "I meant what I said about the foundation. These lessons, these fancy dinners, they're not the real goal for me." "I know." Blake sat beside her on the piano bench. "I'm starting to understand a lot of things I didn't before." Their shoulders touched and neither moved away. Destiny began to play softly, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. "When my mother died," she said quietly. Her last words were, "Don't let them dim your light. I didn't understand then, but I do now." Blake watched her hands move over the keys. "Your light's too bright for anyone to dim," he said softly. In the doorway, Olivia watched them with a knowing smile. But upstairs, Katherine was on the phone again. "It's time for phase 2, she told Ashley. "Call that reporter you know. I think it's time the world learned exactly who Destiny Williams really is." The music played on, sweet and sad, while clouds gathered on the horizon. The bet that started as a revenge plan was becoming something dangerous, not because it might fail, but because it might succeed in ways none of them expected. The morning headlines hit like a bomb. Thompson's homeless experiment, the dark truth about Destiny Williams. Blake found the newspaper on his desk, with photos of Destiny splashed across the front page. The article was brutal, filled with twisted half-truths about her past. "Did you know?" Katherine stood in the doorway, waving another copy of the paper. "She was arrested once, Trespassing at Juilliard after they kicked her out. Let me guess, Blake said coldly. Your friend Ashley's reporter contact wrote this. The public has a right to know who you're bringing into our world. No, Mother. You just couldn't stand seeing her succeed. Before Katherine could respond, Sandra rushed in. Sir, Miss Williams is gone. Blake's heart stopped. What do you mean, gone? She left early this morning. Only took her old backpack. Left everything. Else, Blake ran upstairs to the blue suite. On the perfectly made bed lay the black dress from the dinner party with a note. Thank you for the dream, but I don't belong in your world. Find her, he ordered Sandra. Check every shelter in the city. Oh, darling, Katherine sighed. Perhaps it's for the best. Now everything can go back to normal. Normal? Blake turned on his mother. You mean back to our privileged bubble, where we pretend people like Destiny don't exist, where we judge everyone by their bank account instead of their character. I was trying to protect you. No, you were protecting yourself, your precious social position, your country club status. Blake grabbed his keys. I'm going to find her. But New York was a big city, and Destiny knew how to disappear. Blake spent hours driving through the rain, checking shelters and soup kitchens. No one had seen her. Finally, exhausted and soaked, he ended up at St. Patrick's Cathedral. To his surprise, soft piano music drifted from inside. There she was, sitting at the church's old piano in the corner, playing Bach. Her shoulders were wet from the rain, and she wore her old clothes, but her back was straight as ever. The priest lets me play sometimes, she said without turning around, when the church is empty. The article was mostly true. Her fingers kept moving over the keys. I did break into Juilliard. After Mom died, after I lost everything, I just needed to play one more time. Music was all I had left. Blake sat beside her on the bench. Why didn't you tell me? Would it have mattered? In your world, people like me are either success stories or cautionary tales. There's no in-between. My world needs to change. He reached over and stopped her hands on the keys. And you're helping me see that. She finally looked at him. The bet was a mistake. You can't change society with one makeover story. This isn't about the bet anymore. His voice was rough with emotion. Destiny, you've changed everything. The way I think, the way I see people, the way I see you. A tear slid down her cheek. I can't go back there. Your mother, Ashley, the papers, they'll never accept me. Then we'll make them accept you together. He wiped away her tear. Come back. Not for the bet, not for them, for me. She looked at him for a long moment. Why? Because I think I'm falling in love with you, he said simply. And that terrifies me more than any scandal. Back at the mansion, Katherine was shocked to see them return together. But before she could speak, Olivia stepped forward. Mom, we need to talk. She held up her phone. I have proof that you and Ashley planted that story. If anything like this happens again, it goes public. Katherine's face went pale. You wouldn't dare try me. Olivia hugged Destiny. Welcome home, sis. That night, Destiny played the mansion's piano again. But this time, Blake sat with her, their shoulders touching, their hearts beating in time with the music. In her room, Katherine stared at her phone where Ashley's latest message glowed. This isn't over. Wait until they hear what I found in Chicago. The storm wasn't over, but something had changed. In choosing to return, Destiny had shown more courage than any socialite at their fancy parties, and in choosing her, Blake had finally become the man he was meant to be. The question was, would their love be strong enough for what was coming next? Ashley Bennett sat in her penthouse apartment, smiling at the folder on her desk. Her private investigator had earned every penny she'd paid him for digging up Destiny's past in Chicago. It's perfect, she told Katherine over the phone. Everything we need to destroy her. What exactly did you find? Katherine paced her. Sitting room at the mansion. Let's just say our little piano player has a very interesting history with rich men. Ashley laughed. Meet me at the club. You need to see this in person. Meanwhile, Blake was showing Destiny around Thompson Fashion's main office. The employees tried not to stare as their CEO led a beautiful black woman through the building, his hand resting gently on her back. And this, he said, opening a door, is your new office. Destiny stopped short. What? You said you wanted the foundation to help homeless women. Well, this is where you'll run it from. He gestured to the elegant room with its view of Manhattan. The Thompson Foundation for Women's Empowerment. You're the director. Tears filled her eyes. Blake, I don't know what to say. Say yes. He took her hands. These past few weeks, Watching you handle every challenge they've thrown at you, you're exactly what this company needs. What I need." Before she could respond, Sandra burst in. "Sir, there's an emergency board meeting. They're voting on your leadership." "What?" Blake checked his phone. "They can't do that without notifying me. Ashley called it. She says she has evidence of inappropriate behavior." Blake's face darkened. "Stay here," he told Destiny. "I'll handle this." But Destiny shook her head. "No, we face it together." They walked into the boardroom side by side. Ashley sat there with Katherine, both women smiling like cats who'd caught a canary. The board members looked uncomfortable. "Ah, perfect timing," Ashley said. She started passing out folders. "Board members, I present evidence that Mr. Thompson has been manipulated by a professional con artist." Destiny froze as she saw the photos. They showed her with an older man in Chicago, entering expensive restaurants, hotels. 3 years ago, Ashley continued. "Destiny, Williams was the companion of Chicago businessman Robert Chen. He gave her everything, clothes, jewelry, even paid for her mother's treatments, until she mysteriously disappeared with $50,000 of his money." "The board members murmured. Blake looked at Destiny, whose face had gone pale. "Is it true?" he asked quietly. Destiny stood up, her voice shaking but strong. "Robert Chen was my mother's doctor. He said he'd give her experimental treatments that could save her life, but insurance wouldn't cover them. He made me an offer, be his companion, pretend to be his girlfriend at events, and he'd treat my mother." She faced the board directly. "But it was all a lie. The treatments were fake. He was using desperate women like me for arm candy, promising to save their dying relatives. When I found out, I took the money he'd promised for my mother's care and donated it to a real cancer research center." "How convenient," Ashley smirked. "But where's the proof?" "Right here." Olivia walked in, carrying her own folder. "I did some digging too. Robert Chen lost his medical license last year. 7 women came forward with similar stories. The money Destiny took, she's the reason he was caught." The boardroom erupted in chaos. Katherine started to speak, but Blake cut her off. "Board members, let me be clear. If you vote against my leadership because I chose to help someone expose a predator and create a foundation to help vulnerable women, I'll take my entire fashion line elsewhere. Your choice." One by one, the board members tore up Ashley's folders. "This meeting is adjourned," the chairman announced. Later, in Destiny's new office, Blake held her as she cried. "I wanted to tell you about Chicago," she whispered. "I was afraid I'd be like him, like all the other rich men who saw you as something to possess." She nodded against his chest. "Destiny." He tilted her face up to his. "You're the strongest, most amazing woman I've ever met, and I'm going to spend every day proving I deserve you." In the hallway, Ashley watched them through the glass walls, her face twisted with hatred. She pulled out her phone and dialed. "It didn't work. No, I don't care what it costs. Find something else. Everyone has a breaking point." The sun was setting over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. In her office, Destiny stood in Blake's arms, finally feeling safe. But in the shadows, new threats were gathering. The bet that started it all was almost forgotten now. With 2 weeks left until the charity ball, the real question wasn't whether Destiny could fit into high society. It was whether high society was worthy of her. Ashley paced her penthouse, surrounded by newspaper clippings about Blake and Destiny. The latest society pages were calling them New York's most inspiring love story. It made her sick. "They have to have a weakness," she muttered, scanning the articles again. Then she saw it, a tiny mention of Destiny visiting a women's shelter in Brooklyn. Her eyes lit up with cruel inspiration. Meanwhile, at the Thompson mansion, preparations for the charity ball were in full swing. Destiny sat in the garden with Olivia, going over the foundation's presentation. "We've already got pledges for over $2 million, Olivia said excitedly. "Your story really touched people. Even some of the country club board members are donating." "I still can't believe it." Destiny looked around the beautiful garden. "A month ago, I was arranging flowers for these people. Now I'm running a foundation and dating the most eligible bachelor in New York," Olivia teased. "Speaking of which, Blake's been acting weird lately, all secretive." Before Destiny could respond, Sandra appeared. "Miss Williams, there's someone here to see you. Says she's from your old shelter." Destiny followed Sandra to the front door, where a thin woman in worn clothes waited. "Jenny, what's wrong?" "It's the shelter," Jenny said, wringing her hands. "They're closing it next week. Some developer bought the building. What? No, they can't. Destiny grabbed her coat. I have to see this for myself. Should I tell Mr. Thompson where you've gone? Sandra asked. He's in meetings all day. I'll be back before dinner. But as Destiny's taxi pulled away, Jenny made a phone call. She's on her way, just like you planned, Miss Bennett. At his office, Blake was indeed in meetings, but not the kind Destiny imagined. He sat with the city's top jeweler examining diamond rings. This one, he said finally, selecting a unique design that mixed modern and classic elements. It's elegant, but unpretentious, like her. The papers will go crazy, Sandra warned. CEO proposes to homeless woman after just 1 month? I don't care anymore. Blake smiled, pocketing the ring box. When you know, you know. Katherine watched this scene from the doorway, her heart torn. For the first time, she saw real joy in her son's face. But old prejudices die hard. Blake, she said, entering the office, before you do this, there's something you should know. I've been wrong about many things. He looked at her suspiciously. Go on. I was so focused on protecting our family's position that I couldn't see what Destiny was giving you, giving all of us. She took a deep breath. If you love her, if she makes you happy, you have my blessing. Blake stared at his mother, shocked. What changed your mind? Watching her build this foundation, seeing how she's helped people despite everything we put her through. Katherine's eyes filled with tears. She's exactly what this family needs, someone who remembers where they came from. Meanwhile, Destiny arrived at the shelter, but something felt wrong. The place was empty, no staff, no residents. Then she heard a door lock behind her. Hello, Destiny. Ashley stepped out of the shadows. Let's have a real talk, woman to woman. This was a trap. Destiny's voice was calm, but her heart raced. Smart girl. Ashley circled her like a shark. Here's the deal. Blake's going to propose at the charity ball. Yes, I have my sources, but you're going to say no. You're going to publicly reject him and leave New York. Or what? Ashley smiled, coldly. Or every woman who's ever stayed in this shelter will find themselves on a blacklist. No jobs, no housing, no help. You know how easy it is to fall through the cracks in this city. Destiny felt the blood drain from her face. You wouldn't. Try me. You have until the ball to decide. Their lives or your happiness. Choose wisely. Back at the mansion, Blake was starting to worry. She should have been back by now. He tried calling, but Destiny's phone went straight to voicemail. As night fell, his worry turned to fear. Finally, at almost midnight, Destiny walked through the door. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. Where have you been? Blake rushed to her. I was about to call the police. I just needed time to think. She wouldn't meet his eyes. Blake, I think we need to slow things down. What? Why? Please, her voice broke. Just trust me. She fled upstairs, leaving Blake confused and hurt. In her room, Destiny sat at her window, tears falling as she looked at the city lights. On her phone was a text from Ashley. Tick-tock. 1 week until the ball. Make the right choice. The moon rose over Manhattan, casting shadows over secrets and lies, love and sacrifice. In 1 week, everything would change, but no one, not even Ashley, could predict exactly how. The week before the charity ball felt like the longest. So of Blake's life. Something was wrong with Destiny. She barely spoke to him, avoided being alone with him, and spent hours at the foundation office. I don't understand, he told Olivia over coffee. Everything was perfect. Now she's pulling away. Olivia watched her brother fidget with the ring box he'd been carrying everywhere. Have you asked her what's wrong? She keeps saying she's fine, just busy with the ball preparations. But Destiny wasn't fine. Every night she lay awake, Ashley's threat echoing in her mind. During the day, she threw herself into foundation work, visiting shelters and meeting with women whose lives could be destroyed if she made the wrong choice. Katherine noticed the change too. One afternoon, she found Destiny crying in the music room. My dear, Katherine said softly, what's troubling you? Destiny quickly wiped her eyes. Nothing, Mrs. Thompson, I'm fine. No, you're not. Katherine sat beside her on the piano bench. I know I've been difficult, but I see how much you love my son. And more importantly, I see how much he loves you. Sometimes love isn't enough, Destiny whispered. That's Ashley talking, not you. When Destiny's head snapped up in surprise, Katherine smiled grimly. I know her too well. What did she threaten you with? Slowly, Destiny told her everything. The trap at the shelter, the ultimatum, the impossible choice. Katherine's face hardened. That vindictive little... Listen to me. Ashley doesn't have half the power she claims, but she knows how to prey on people's fears. I can't risk it. Those women at the shelter, they have nothing. They have you. Katherine took Destiny's hands. And now they have me too. Trust me, dear. Ashley's about to learn what real power looks like. Meanwhile, Blake was in his office staring at the ring when Sandra rushed in. Sir, there's something you need to see. She handed him her tablet, showing security footage from the shelter the day Destiny disappeared. His blood ran cold as he watched Ashley enter after her. Get me everything on that building, he ordered. Property records, sale documents, everything. Already did, sir. Sandra's eyes gleamed. The developer who supposedly bought it, shell company owned by Ashley's father. Blake grabbed his phone, but Sandra stopped him. Wait, there's more. Look who just arrived. On the security feed, Katherine Thompson walked into the shelter, her designer heels clicking on the concrete floor. She carried a large envelope. Across town, Ashley was having lunch with her society friends when Katherine slid into the empty chair at her table. Faster. Hello, dear. Katherine's smile was razor sharp. We need to talk about the shelter. I have no idea what you mean, Ashley said smoothly. Katherine opened her envelope and began laying down papers. Property records, bank transfers, emails, about blacklisting homeless women. Imagine if the press got hold of these. Ashley's face went white. You're bluffing. Try me. You forget, dear. I taught you everything you know about social warfare, but not everything I know. Back at the mansion, Destiny was in the garden when Blake found her. Why didn't you tell me about Ashley's threat? She spun around. How did you? It doesn't matter. What matters is you thinking you had to handle this alone. He pulled her into his arms. Don't you know by now? Your fights are my fights. I was trying to protect them, she whispered against his chest. The women at the shelter are safe. Mother's handling Ashley, and the foundation is setting up a program to make sure no one can ever blacklist them again. Destiny looked up at him through tears. Your mother? Apparently she's Team Destiny now. He smiled. She said you taught her that real class means standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. For the first time in days, Destiny really smiled. I can't believe she did that for me. We'd all do anything for you. Blake took a deep breath, his hand moving to his pocket. Destiny, No. She put her fingers to his lips. Not yet. Ask me at the ball like you planned. I want to remember every detail when I say yes. His eyes lit up. When you say yes. She kissed him softly. Did you really think I could say anything else? Inside the house, Katherine was on the phone. It's handled. Ashley won't be a problem anymore. What did you do? Olivia asked. Let's just say she's taking an extended vacation, far away from New York. Katherine watched through the window as Blake and Destiny walked the garden, hand in hand. I had to protect my future daughter-in-law, didn't I? The charity ball was 2 days away. Destiny's dress hung ready in her room, a gorgeous creation from Blake's best designers. The foundation presentation was prepared. Everything was perfect. But no one saw Jenny, the woman from the shelter, meeting with a desperate Ashley in a dark bar. One last chance, Ashley said, pushing an envelope across the table. And this time, we destroy them both. The Thompson mansion glowed like a fairy tale castle on the night of the charity ball. Crystal chandeliers sparkled, champagne flowed, and New York's elite filled the ballroom in their finest clothes. In the blue suite, Olivia helped Destiny into her gown, a stunning creation, in midnight blue with silver stars that seemed to float as she moved. Blake's going to faint when he sees you, Olivia grinned, adjusting the dress's trailing skirt. If Ashley doesn't ruin everything first. Destiny touched the diamond earrings Blake had given her, her first real jewelry. Ashley's been handled. Remember? Tonight is your night? Downstairs, Blake paced nervously, the ring box heavy in his pocket. The foundation's presentation would come first, then the dancing, and then at midnight under the garden lights, he would propose. Katherine approached him, elegant in silver grey. Darling, you're wearing a path in the marble. What if She'll say yes. Katherine squeezed his arm. Now stop fidgeting, you look like a schoolboy at his first dance. The guests were arriving in force. The country club board members, society matrons, business leaders, all curious to see the woman who had captured Blake Thompson's heart. And then Destiny appeared at the top of the stairs. The room fell silent. She was radiant, regal, her simple elegance putting every other woman's designer gown to shame. As she descended, Blake moved to meet her, taking her hand. "You're beautiful," he whispered. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer called, "Miss Destiny Williams, director of the Thompson Foundation for Women's Empowerment." Applause filled the room. Genuine applause, not the polite society kind. Destiny had won them over one by one with her grace and determination. The foundation presentation was a triumph. Destiny spoke from the heart about second chances and the power of community. When she finished, the donation pledges had doubled. "Dance with me," Blake said, leading her to the floor as the orchestra began to play. They waltzed together, lost in their own world. Even the society photographers stopped taking pictures, caught up in the romance of the moment. But in the shadows, Jenny from the shelter watched, Ashley's envelope burning in her purse. The plan was simple. Wait until Blake's proposal, then expose everything. Only it wasn't going according to plan. As Jenny watched Destiny dance, saw the joy and love radiating from her face, something broke inside her. "I can't do it," she whispered, pulling out her phone. "I'm sorry, Miss Bennett. Find someone else." Ashley's voice was ice cold. Too late. Plan B. The music stopped. Ashley herself walked into the ballroom, wearing blood red and carrying a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice echoing, "before my ex-fiancé makes his big proposal, I think you should all know the truth." Blake started forward, but Destiny squeezed his hand. "No, let her talk. This whole fairy tale romance, it's a lie." Ashley's smile was cruel. "It started as a bet. Blake wagered he could turn any homeless woman into a society lady. Destiny. That was just a prop in his game of revenge against me," the crowd murmured. Ashley continued, "And sweet, innocent Destiny. She played along for the money, just like she played along with other rich men before." "That's enough." Katherine's voice cut through the whispers. "Ashley, leave now, or I release everything I have on you. Everything." But Ashley pulled out her trump card, a recording on her phone. Blake's drunken voice from the Met Gala. "I bet I could take any woman at all, and turn her into a better society lady than Ashley ever was." Destiny stepped forward, her face calm. "Are you finished?" Ashley faltered. This wasn't the reaction she expected. "Yes, it started as a bet." Destiny's voice carried clearly through the silent room. Blake was hurt and angry, and he made a stupid wager. But something wonderful happened instead. She turned to face the crowd. "We fell in love, real love, the kind that changes you, that makes you want to be better, that gives you courage to face anything, even people who try to tear you down, out of jealousy and spite." Blake moved to her side, taking her hand. "The foundation wasn't part of the bet," Destiny continued. "That came from my heart, from knowing what it's like to need help and have nowhere to turn, and every one of you in this room has helped make it reality." She looked at Ashley with pity. "You wanted to destroy us. Instead, you've just proved why this work is so important. Because hurt people, and the cycle has to stop somewhere." The room erupted in applause. Ashley stood frozen as Katherine took the microphone from her hand. "I believe it's time for your extended vacation to begin," Katherine said, softly. "The car is waiting outside." As Ashley fled the ballroom, Blake turned to Destiny. Everything was wrong. The timing, the drama. But his heart couldn't wait another moment. He dropped to one knee. The crowd gasped. And in that imperfect moment, time stood still. The ballroom was silent as Blake knelt before Destiny, holding up a ring that sparkled like starlight. "I had a whole speech prepared," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "about how you changed my life, my heart, my whole world. But the truth is simple." He took a deep breath. "Destiny Williams, I love you. Will you marry me?" Tears sparkled in Destiny's eyes. She looked around the ballroom, at Katherine's encouraging smile, at Olivia's excited grin, at all the society faces that had once seemed so foreign and now looked on with genuine warmth. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes." The crowd erupted in cheers as Blake slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a kiss. The orchestra started playing, and flower petals fell from the ceiling, Olivia's secret touch. But the night wasn't over yet. "If I may," Destiny said, taking Blake's hand and leading him to the grand piano in the corner. "I have something for you too." She sat at the piano, her midnight blue gown flowing around her like starlit water. The room went quiet again as her fingers touched the keys. The music that filled the ballroom was something entirely new, a piece she had composed herself, weaving together classical training and raw emotion. It told their story in notes and harmonies. The bet, the lessons, the falling in love, the struggles and the triumph. When she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. Blake helped her up and kissed her again, not caring who saw. "That was beautiful," he whispered. "Like you." "I call it from bet to forever," she smiled. "I've been working on it every night in the music room." Katherine stepped forward, dabbing her eyes. "My dear, I've been terrible to you. Can you ever forgive me?" "You already proved yourself," Destiny said, hugging her future mother-in-law. "When it mattered most, you chose love over prejudice." The party continued late into the night. The foundation received more pledges than they'd ever dreamed possible. The society pages would call it the most romantic evening in New York history. 6 months later, Destiny stood in the blue suite again, this time in a wedding dress. The foundation was thriving, having helped dozens of women off the streets and into new lives. The country club had elected her to their board, their first black member. And Ashley? She was somewhere in Europe learning that money couldn't buy happiness. "Ready?" Olivia asked, adjusting Destiny's veil. "More than ready." The garden was transformed into a wonderland of flowers, many arranged by Destiny herself. As the wedding march began, she took her first step toward forever. Blake waited at the altar, looking at her like she was a miracle. In a way, she was. A miracle that started with a drunken bet and ended with a love that changed everyone it touched. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, but Destiny barely heard the words. She was lost in Blake's eyes. In the future, they would build together. Their vows were simple but profound. No fancy words, just promises from the heart. When Blake kissed his bride, the applause could be heard all the way to Manhattan. At the reception, Destiny played her composition again, but this time it had a new ending, full of joy and promise. Blake surprised her by sitting down beside her on the bench, playing a simple melody he'd secretly learned just for her. "I love you, Mrs. Thompson," he said softly. "I love you too," she smiled, "but I'm keeping Williams for my foundation work. Hope you don't mind." "I wouldn't have it any other way." Later that night, they danced under the stars, surrounded by friends and family, real family, the kind that's forged by love and acceptance, not just blood and tradition. Katherine raised her glass for a toast. "To my children, all of them. Thank you for teaching an old woman that true class has nothing to do with color or money. It's about the size of your heart." 1 year later, Destiny sat in her foundation office, one hand resting on her growing belly as she reviewed success stories. A photo on her desk showed her and Blake at the shelter's new building, now renamed the Williams Thompson Center for Women's Empowerment. The society pages still wrote about them, but not as a scandal or a Cinderella story. They were simply Blake and Destiny, a power couple using their influence to change lives, one person at a time. And every night, in the music room of their home, Destiny still played their song, but now it had many new verses, each one a chapter in their ongoing love story. The bet was long forgotten, transformed into something far more valuable, a legacy of love, acceptance, and the power of seeing beyond surface differences to the heart within. As the sun set over Manhattan, Destiny felt her baby kick and smiled. Their child would grow up in a world a little bit better than the one she'd known, a world where bets could become blessings and love could bridge any divide. And that was the greatest happy ending of all, the end.